Democrats, of course, looking to black voters to deliver another victory, and this time in the Senate. The black voting bloc, which makes up a third of Georgia's electorate, could make or break Democrats' hopes for a unified government. That's if they turn out to vote the way they did in November's general election. So joining us now to discuss the Georgia runoffs and the impact of black voters on U.S. elections is Cliff Albright. Cliff is a co-founder of Black Voters Matter, a national Get Out the Vote organization dedicated to increasing the impact of black voters. Cliff, so glad you could join us today. Really important conversation here. I want to start with the backdrop because the history is that we have a long documented history of voter suppression and undelivered promises that has really made a lot of black voters disillusioned, especially in the South. I know your group has been doing a lot of groundwork in Georgia for years now, registering black voters, getting them to the polls. What have you found is the single most effective way to court black voters who don't trust the system and institutions like the Electoral College?
So, yeah, thanks for having me. So, we've had this crazy notion that one of the ways that you can actually get voters, black voters involved in the process, call me crazy, but we actually believe that if you speak with black voters, that you might get them more involved, right? That the best way to create a super voter, a so-called super voter who votes in every election cycle, is that you've actually got to speak with them. You've got to knock on their door. You got to send them a text. You got to make a phone call. You got to send them some targeted messaging on social media. Part of the problem that we've seen is that we have a lot of black voters that never get one of those contacts, right? The South in general, and Georgia in particular, has been looked at as ceded territory, right? It's territory that progressive groups and the party and some candidates really just gave up on and just decided we're not going to invest in the South. We're not going to invest in real discussions. We're not going to invest in the organizations that have authentic relationships within these communities. We're just not going to do it. And therefore, you have people who already are cynical because of voter suppression, and then they don't get involved. So part of our theory of change is that we've got to reach out to folks. We say black voters matter everywhere, and we try to reach out to black voters, even in some of the counties and cities that, a lot of times don't get a lot of attention.
Yeah, the solution sounds so simple, but of course doing it is actually quite difficult. Having said all that, what was the biggest challenge black voters faced in the November election, and to what extent were you able to address that for this Senate runoff?
Yeah, so I'm going to cheat. I'm going to give two challenges. The first challenge is perhaps the most obvious. It's coronavirus. We've been doing all of this work, even going back to the June primaries. We had to do all this work. We had to really educate voters on what this vote by mail process is all about. Back in June, you had a lot of people who had never done it before, right? Only, 5% or 10% of our population had ever really done absentee voting. And so we had to really educate folks who, like you said, are already skeptical about voters and about voter suppression and about this concept of voting by mail. We don't trust it. So that took a lot of education. In November, that process was a little bit easier because we had been through it before. But still, you had all the other challenges of COVID. You have, not being able to really door knock, not being able to do the same types of events, even with our bus tours. As I'm speaking to you now, I'm on what we call the Blackest Bus in America. We do our bus tours and we go to communities and we have big events and we hug and we dance and all of that. It's harder to do that in the midst of a pandemic. Yeah. And so that's been the biggest challenge. And then the second challenge is the voter suppression challenge that you started off with. Contrary to popular belief, our Secretary of State is not a profiling courage. He's one of the biggest voter suppressors in the country. He's purged voters that should not have been purged, as well as some other voter suppression activities. And so, those are the two challenges that we faced in November. We continue to face them today with this election cycle, but we're convinced that we're going to see historic turnout in this runoff election.
All right. Well, obviously, there's a lot of national interest in what happens with this election because the stakes are so high. And that's really reflected in the amount of fundraising that this race has generated and the attention in the media, present company included, of course. What is the most unexpected way that you're seeing that play out in Georgia?
I think perhaps the most unexpected way is that, it's not really unexpected to us, but it's unexpected to a lot of people. The money that's spent on some of these TV ads, it's not the best form of outreach. We've got a lot of folks that, they just don't pay attention to it. They're tuning it out. To a certain extent, sometimes you have to do it when you're getting barraged by a whole bunch of negative ads coming from the other side. And so you got to respond to it. But really what we have found in our experience is that the most effective outreach has been, it's been person to person, whether that's person to person live in front of a door, or whether it's a friend reaching out to another friend by text message. One of the things that we do all the time is we have a 5 friends pledge. We try to get everybody we touch, whether it's in a caravan or at a drive-in event or in a shopping center parking lot or out in the streets, everybody we touch, we say we want to turn them into an organizer, that they all have a role to play. Just reaching out to 5 friends or 10 friends and telling their friends that they need to come out and vote in this election. It's always going to be more impactful coming from somebody you know and trust than from coming from any number of organizations that are sending all these text messages. And you see it says, "Hi, this is Cliff from such and such organization." And I'm thinking, well, I don't know you, right? But we try to get the folks that we touch to become the organizers. That's been the most effective form of outreach.
It's a true social network in that way. Cliff, you've been doing a lot of organizing the last 4 years. Clearly, everything kind of culminates with this election today. When this race is called, what will be your first order of business? What does Black Voters Matter move on to next?
Well, besides getting a little bit of sleep, the next order of business is really going to be about, taking stock of like everything we did throughout this historic year, looking at what worked, looking at what didn't work, touching base with all of the partners. We have partners in 50 counties across the state of Georgia, and Georgia is just one of 12 states where we do our work. And so we try to take stock of our partnerships and seeing, how can we be better partners and better stewards and be in relationship with our network even better. And so those are some of the things we'll be doing. But be clear, 2021 is not an off year. For us, we always say there's no such thing as an off year. We've got some of the places where we do our work. There are local elections taking place as soon as February. I just got a text the other day from somebody who's running for mayor in a state, and their election is in February. Local elections are huge in 2020, 2021, and particularly given all of the energy and the protest movement that we saw in the summer, a lot of the issues of police accountability are decided at the local level. And so that's going to show up in these 2021 elections. So unfortunately, we're not going to get much of a break. We might get a couple of days off to exhale a little bit, but then it's right back at it for us.
All right. Well, your work is never done then. Cliff Albright of Black Voters Matter, thank you so much for your time, and get some rest.
The biggest stories the moment they happen from around the globe. Subscribe to Bloomberg Quick Take now for insight in an instant.